Hello and welcome to Witness Eye. Today we have Dr. Ori Goldberg, an Israeli human rights activist, as well as Merima Preguda, a journalist from Bosnia. Dr. Goldberg, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here with us. Dr. Goldberg, to begin, from your perspective, what are the defining characteristics of the ongoing conflict in Gaza, and how do they align or diverge from historical patterns of conflict in the region?
I wouldn't even call it a conflict at this stage. Initially, it began as something that has become familiar over the past 15 years, which is a Hamas rocket offensive, an Israeli ground incursion, and continued fighting on the ground until both sides reach a resolution. But this time, following the October 7th, 2023 Hamas attack, Israel began bombing in unprecedented numbers and volume, and this bombing has continued for a year and a half. A massive ground incursion, the sort of which Israel has not uh, conducted in Gaza previously, also took place, which resulted in basically the demolition of the Gaza Strip in cities like Rafah. Something like 80% of the structures, most of them are not even there anymore, and the ones that are left are uninhabitable. And the bombing, of course, continues. And I think perhaps the main characteristic of this conflict so far is Israel's conscious decision to lift any, probably almost all, the defenses that international humanitarian law grants civilians or non-combatants in this conflict. Israel bombs freely, shoots freely, kills freely, destroys freely.
Dr. Goldberg, how do religious ideologies within Israeli society influence the state's policies and actions towards Gaza?
Well, I think the answer would be that their influence is mostly carried out in very strictly political institutional terms. The majority of Israeli society doesn't consider the Gaza issue a religious issue or something that should be resolved because of religious differences or religious war. There are those who do, but they are a minority. In Israel, generally, the collective religion is security. Israel is here to maintain and guard the safety, the lives of Jews. Okay, we are here, that the state is here to make sure that Jews are never killed again because they are Jews or for whatever other reason. That's not the same as a religious ideology, though. Security is an ideal that is worshipped by all sectors of Israeli society, and all of them imbue it with their own special content. Settlers of the hardcore religious right sees Israeli security as the beginning of a Jewish empire. Majority of Israel's secular Jewish citizens see security as the one thing that binds all Israelis together, regardless of political differences, for example. So I would say religious ideologies have an influence, but mostly in the terms of the power that their adherents carry in government, and not so much in society at large.
Yes, and from your point of view, how does the concept of theologies of the real, as discussed in your work, manifest in the current Israeli-Palestinian dynamics?
Um, how does the concept? Well, good question. The concept I tried to discuss of theologies of the real was an attempt to talk about the return of religion to the political sphere, but not as an abstract ideology. Secular ideologies believe in a future that can be close to perfect, and in making the present as close to that future as possible. Religious ideologies, if you will, or theologies of the real, believe in working with the present. They understand contradiction, they understand irresolvable tensions. They try to be as realistic and as pragmatic as possible. Sadly, in Israel, those who are the bearers of a theology or a religious ideology are taking it exactly to the other side, to the other end. They don't want realism. They don't want practical measures. They want a solution that will be, and it's unfortunate that I have to use this word, the final solution. right? And that's not code necessarily for being Nazis, but they want to feel as though what Israel set out to do after October 7th is the final measure that Israel is going to take, that we will no longer be bothered by a threat from Gaza. And there have been a lot of ways of talking about it in Israeli society, but they all amount to the same thing, which is support and, if not support, at the very least, an enabling of Israel's genocidal campaign.
And how is Israeli society internally grappling with the moral and ethical implications of the military's actions in Gaza?
Very little, if at all. There is a small minority of people who speak and think the way I do when I'm speaking to you here. I would say that we number in the tens of thousands at the very most. Okay, I don't know, maybe even less. But the great majority of Israeli society has taken it to heart that Israel bears no moral or ethical responsibility for the events in Gaza. Everything that Israel is doing in Gaza, Israel has to do because of what Hamas did to us. So we see ourselves as completely absolved of any kind of responsibility or even recognizing that our actions have consequences. If civilians die in Hamas, they die because Hamas operates from within a civilian population or uses them as human shields. If the demolition of all structures standing in Gaza exceeds pretty much every number we know from 21st century conflicts or even from 20th century conflicts, that's because Hamas has been hiding in schools, clinics, mosques, whatever. If Israel bombs an area that it itself declared as a safe area where displaced Gazans live in tents. We had to do that because a senior Hamas commander was visiting. So, no ethics, no morality. It might be sad, good things can happen, bad things can happen to good people. It's a war and so on, but absolutely nothing when it comes to a reckoning or an acknowledgement of how Israel's actions in Gaza over the past year and a half have affected the lives of Gazans.
And what role does the military establishment play in shaping public opinion and policies regarding Gaza?
The military is perhaps the social institution in Israel that has the most trust from ordinary Israelis. It's considered to be professional, above politics, devoted to the upholding of what I earlier referred to as Israel's true civil religion, which is security. But the military is suffering right now. First of all, it failed. It failed to bring back the hostages, and it failed to destroy Hamas. And the military wants redemption. The military wants to be acknowledged as the power that can actually bring about the realization of those goals. But the military also wants actual power. It wants increased budgets. It wants the ability to draft Israelis for reserve duty or for compulsory army service for longer periods. It wants to control aspects of civil society because, as far as the military is concerned, civil society should devote itself to the quote unquote war effort because were it not for the war effort, there would be no civil society. So, and you can add to that the fact that at, let's call it junior general level, division commanders, regimental commanders, you have a lot of officers who are ideological, who do see Israel's presence in Gaza as full of ideological content, who do want to drive out Palestinians, who are very much committed to that position. But that's not, I think, the main point. The main point is that the military does what militaries do. The military wants to fight, and having failed at the war that it set out to fight, it wants to redeem itself, and the only way it can do that is by fighting more.
And Dr. Goldberg, have you observed shifts in public discourse and attitudes within Israeli concerning the conflict? What factors contribute to these changes?
The truth is that while I would have liked to answer you in the positive, Uh, there really are very few fluctuations. There's a lot of discourse about the hostages, but even that has grown less and less visible in the public eye as the number of hostages has shrunk. Remember that initially there were about slightly under 250 hostages. That was a big number, but now and then when people said we're not going to return the hostages, we have to destroy Hamas. People were like, that's a lot of hostages. Now there are, I don't know, less than 30 hostages considered still alive. So people who are against a hostage deal that will perhaps bring the ceasefire or an end to the fighting can now say with much more vigor, are we going to deny our need for security because of 20 people? That doesn't make sense. But even the conversations about the hostages, the one important thing to remember about Israeli discourse at this moment is that it is completely focused in on itself. Right? It's about Israelis talking to Israelis. Israelis, they don't care about what the world says, they don't care about Israel's economic future. They seem to not even care about their jobs or the rising prices or how hard it is getting to just be alive here. Uh, the entire conversation is a tactical conversation about what the right thing is to do to make sure people recognize that Israel is the good guy in this story. So real changes, very few. People like me who have been against this from the beginning, we remain a very distinct minority. Our voice perhaps is heard a little louder now, but even that is subject to fluctuations on a daily basis. Israelis are concerned with ensuring that the Israeli perspective is the only one heard and seen by other Israelis.
And Dr. Goldberg, do you feel safe?
I do, actually. I don't, I mean, people who think like me are so far off the beaten track, are considered to have strayed so far from the mainstream. I don't think anybody thinks of us as a threat. People, might get irate at things we write on social media platforms or something like that. But, uh, if you go out into the street and you demonstrate, and you can get some violent reactions. But I mostly talk because I'm also I was diagnosed with cancer 6 months ago, so I'm going through chemotherapy and various other treatments. I don't get up much. And as someone who talks, I think most people have given up interest. I also write extensively in English, and most people have stopped reading English. They only read Hebrew. Um, but so if I can deduce anything from my personal story, it's mostly that the kind of opposition that I offer is at the very best, mostly symbolic and is very, very small in scope when compared to Israeli society in general. So I think people don't care so much, they think I'm crazy, not a threat to national security.
Yes, and considering international legal frameworks, how do you assess the actions in Gaza in terms of compliance or violation of the international humanitarian law?
To the best of my understanding, well, Israel is in clear violation of international humanitarian law as established by the International Court of Justice. The Israeli occupation of the West Bank and Gaza is illegal. Israel is legally bound to end the occupation. As far as Israel's actions in Gaza now, there's a big argument about whether they amount to genocide or not. I think they do because I think the framework for genocide is changing in scholarly debate and also in legal debate. It's very hard for Israelis to accept this because the only true genocide was, of course, our genocide, um, the Holocaust, that is. But to the best of my understanding, after a year and a half, it would be very difficult to disprove allegations of genocide. I think that even according to the way the crime of genocide is defined right now, it is easy to present both intent and systemic action targeted against Palestinians as a group rather than against specific, military targets, despite Israel's protestations to the contrary. It's not easy, won't be easy because Israel has taken great care not to have any kind of official document that says kill all the Palestinians. In fact, I don't think Israel wants to kill all the Palestinians. Israel just doesn't care. No? Israel doesn't have a clear goal in what it's doing right now. Obviously, it's not to release the hostages. It's not to occupy Gaza because there's a general political consensus among most Israelis that we don't want to occupy Gaza. Now we're fighting because it's the only thing we can do and because we ascribe no importance or value whatsoever to the Palestinian blood that we spill. So it's difficult to pin an international crime on Israel when it comes to genocide. It's not difficult at all when it comes to eradication, for example. So I don't know how Israel will be brought to justice, but I assume every day passing, that task gets easier and easier.
Yes, but there definitely has to be something. And do you think that are there any mechanisms to hold state actors accountable for potential violations, and how effective are those laws in context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, considering everything you've said so far?
Those are two, I think, very pertinent questions. Let's start with the first one. Of course, there are mechanisms, but they're weak and they're subject to political circumstances. The EU has to make up its mind about Hungary, an EU member, inviting Prime Minister Netanyahu for a state visit. But as long as Viktor Orban, Hungary's Prime Minister, doesn't do anything about it, the EU doesn't have the actual power of enforcement. Right? So this is about politics and the hope that political frameworks evolve and change. As for the second question that you asked, or the second part of the question, um, how will this happen, if at all? What are we going, you know, what sort of justice will be served in this case? Here, I'm actually optimistic, cautiously, because I think that it will be slow, but the process shows no sign of dwindling. Uh, People who are representing South Africa, Palestinians, or whatever cause and whatever organization, people are doing the work very diligently. I'm thinking of someone like the UN Special Rapporteur, Francesca Albanese, who is relentless in her efforts. And that is exactly the right model. Why is it the right model for action? Because Israel is teetering. Israel appears to be omnipotent, appears to have no limits on its actions, but the truth is, Israel is stuck and has been stuck for quite a while. Israel does not know how to get out of this predicament. It kills Palestinians again, because in Israeli eyes, Palestinian blood is cheaper than air. But it doesn't have any kind of goal or any kind of end game. It has no justification. The notion of a war being fought against some kind of local or global threat is, I think, laughable in the eyes of the great majority of the world. Very few people are actively buying what Israel has to sell. Unfortunately, that's not enough for the Palestinians who continue to die at Israel's hands. But if we're trying to think about how the international legal system progresses, this is how it progresses. And I think movement is very much there.
And Dr. Goldberg, how can scholars and analysts contribute to documenting and disseminating information about the situation in Gaza to contribute to informing the international audiences?
Well, I think they need to do what they're doing. I think, well, some of them at least. But again, even bastions of Israeli propaganda are crumbling before the sheer volume of the facts and the evidence that is pouring out of that. So, what I think needs to be, I think two things need to be done. First is to make the information accessible, and I think that's happening on various platforms, and also to try and put it. I think exactly the same thing needs to be done, and to the best of my knowledge, that is what's happening.
Sorry.
You lost me?
Yes, we lost you for just a second.
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah,
just
sure.
answer the question one more time, please, if it's not a problem to you?
Not a problem at all.
Thank you.
So you asked what the media can do, what analysts can do, what scholars can do to keep this in the public eye and to, well, effectively promote the cause of justice. And I said you need to do two things. One is to make the information as accessible as possible, and the second is to put it in an orderly framework. And both of these ways are very direct ways of fighting Israel's strong points. The first of Israel's strengths is withholding and lying, as we saw, for example, when it came to the um, killing of the 15 first responders and paramedics in Rafah. Today, Haaretz publishes an account that says they were basically, they weren't executed in the sense of being marched out of ambulances and shot in the head, but the IDF soldiers who engaged and basically fired for 5 minutes straight, including changing clips on their guns without offering them any chance of identifying themselves. So Israel withholds information. Bringing information to light is critical in trying to fight this Israeli effort. And the second is to put it in an orderly framework to explain what Israel is doing and how Israel is doing it. Because Israel is insisting very tenaciously that it is doing these things in the only way it can do these things, and that it is right existentially, legally, politically. Uh, in order to stand up to Israel, advocates of justice, of international justice in this case, need to do exactly the same.
In the context of everything that you have just said, how do we ensure the accurate and comprehensive coverage of the events in conflicts in Gaza? Like, how do we make sure that the truth is being told to the world?
We tell it. We don't argue with other venues that are obviously tainted, that are obviously biased. We don't try to prove them wrong. We just put the information out there. And I think that if you do it consistently enough, to the best of my knowledge, the cracks in Israel's armor are already quite massive. I don't think Israel can maintain this facade of lies for much longer. It can, but I don't think it can maintain it forever. So what we do is talk. We talk and talk and talk until we're blue in the face. We understand that not all of our listeners, not all of our audience will have the attention span and the will to absorb all of this, to take all of this in. But we talk. That's what we do. We make it present, the truth. And then, people will choose. I think most people have already chosen. I think the heart of the world generally, certainly of the global south, but not just the global south, is not with Israel. And that's why I think we have to keep at it. And I don't think we have to go out of our way again to prove that Israel is lying. The fact that Israel is lying is now, I think, conventional wisdom.
And Dr. Goldberg, what steps should the international community take to address and resolve the humanitarian crisis in Gaza?
The international community, but that's really wishful thinking, should put all of its weight behind forcing Israel to accept that it must end its quote unquote war on Gaza, that it must withdraw its forces from the Gaza Strip, that it must reach some kind of solution with a Palestinian political entity, even if it isn't directly Hamas, or even if it is. And if that doesn't happen, then the international community should deny Israel access to the weapons it needs to carry on this war. As I say this, it's very obvious to me that none of this is going to happen. Certainly not the second part, but if you're asking what should happen, this is what should happen. Israel is very clearly in violation of just about every international law there is. So the international community is doing itself a great deal of harm by refusing to enforce and even to acknowledge, the veracity of the international legal regime. As long as it doesn't do that, it will end up bearing the brunt of the consequences of Israel's actions.
And how can historical understanding of religious and political dynamics in the Middle East inform current strategies for achieving justice and peace,
I don't
from your
know that
point of
it's
view?
about, uh, obviously, the only one I have. I don't know
Yes.
if it's about, I don't know if it's about history as much as now. Now I think it's about humanity. or that the humanity. When there were negotiations, when there was a political process, you could talk about historical narratives and which one should be accepted and which one shouldn't, and so on. Now I think it's about Israel being forced to acknowledge that Palestinians are human beings, that they deserve human rights by simply by being human beings, not as a favor or a grace that Israel extends to them. And once that happens, other things can happen as well, although they will happen slowly, although this will take time. I don't expect Palestinians to trust Israel. We've given them no reason to trust us. So I have no doubt this will be slow and cumbersome and lengthy in duration, but it can only start if Israel acknowledges the humanity of Palestinians, and the best, most effective way to do that is to end Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories, as well as withdraw from Gaza and open it up for international reconstruction.
And what message would you like to convey to global audiences about the situation in Gaza and the broader implications for regional stability?
The message I think I would like to convey is not just about regional stability, it's about global stability. Israel's crimes in Gaza, I think, are of global consequence, not just regional consequence. And the lesson I would like to convey is that genocide is part of the human condition, part of the human experience, the great human package. It's accessible, it's there, it can be reached. You don't have to be particularly evil or to belong to a particular group. You have to be on your guard. You have to be very wary from the possibility of flipping and turning full genocidal. I get a lot of responses from people who say this has always been Zionism's plan. This has always been the Jewish plan. This is what Israel has wanted to do ever since its inception. I don't necessarily disagree, but I don't think what Israel is doing demonstrates a particular trait of Israeliness or of Zionism or of Judaism. I think this is a human tendency. I think Israel now represents the very worst that humanity can do when it comes to perpetrating genocide on another people. And the message I want to give audiences is that you have to learn from Israel's experience. Just condemning Israel isn't enough. Watch closely, learn, read, understand what is happening in Israel as much as you can. Expose yourself, even though it's difficult, to what is happening and to what Israelis are saying. Be on your guard. Make sure it doesn't happen where you live and it doesn't happen to you.
Dr. Goldberg, thank you so much for your time and for speaking with us here at Witness Eye.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We have just spoken to Dr. Ori Goldberg, a human rights activist from Israel. Stay tuned with Witness Eye until next time.